In 1970, the United States Congress passed the Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA, to provide every working man and woman in the nation a safe and healthful workplace. One of the most important roles that it gave the new agency was to develop safety and health standards. The standards that OSHA has established have saved literally thousands of lives. For example, in 1978, when OSHA's cotton dust standard was adopted, there were 40,000 cases of brown lung disease annually. 12% of all textile workers suffered from this deadly disease. By the year 2000, and because of the OSHA standard, brown lung has virtually been eliminated. OSHA's 1978 standard on lead dramatically reduced lead poisoning, and the 1989 evacuation standard designed to protect workers from trench collapse has reduced deaths by more than 20%, while construction activity has actually increased by 20%. OSHA has made an enormous difference in workers' lives, but sadly, many workers are still at risk from unsafe conditions in their workplaces. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that in the year 2005, there were over 5,700 workers, or 16 workers a day, killed in the workplace. In addition to terrible fatalities, there are millions more workers like Mr. Peoples, who's here to speak with us today as a witness, who suffer from injuries and illnesses based on their working conditions. This is not a time to slow down on protecting worker safety, but yet that is what the administration has done. There are various areas where OSHA has failed to do its job, and over the coming months, this committee will look into those failures. Today's hearing will focus on standard setting, and in this arena, the administration has the worst record of standard setting of any administration in the history of the law. The administration began on a tragic note for American workers with the shameful repeal of OSHA's ergonomic standards. That was followed by the removal of dozens of rules from the regulatory agenda, including the standard to protect healthcare workers against tuberculosis. I pray that we don't live to regret when extremely poor drug-resistant TB comes before us, which is killing 2/3 of those who get it in South Africa. If that reaches this nation in significant numbers, we don't have any standards. We don't know what to do about it in our workplace. To date, this administration has issued only one significant health standard to protect workers against cancer-causing chemical, and it is the chemical hexavalent chromium. And that standard was issued under court order. It was not done voluntarily. One of the worst failures of this administration is its failure to issue a rule that requires employers to pay for employees' personal protection equipment. This rule was almost finished during the Clinton administration. 7 years later, OSHA has finally agreed to issue the standard, again under the threat of a court order. Today we will hear the tragic story of Eric Peoples, who has popcorn lung disease and has lost much of his lung capacity. He faces, because of his exposure to a chemical, possibly a shorter life than others his age. And that chemical is called diacetyl. And it is used in butter flavoring for popcorn. The industry and OSHA are well aware that exposure to diacetyl has dire health consequences for workers, but OSHA has yet to initiate regulatory action. In fact, the entire area of chemical regulation is a travesty. OSHA currently regulates only about 600 chemicals out of the tens of thousands used in industry. But most Americans would be shocked to learn that these standards are based on science from the 1950s and the 1960s. I'm also concerned that OSHA is substituting voluntary programs for enforceable standards. We want to know what evidence OSHA has to argue that these voluntary programs are effective replacements for OSHA standards. We owe it to our workers to protect their health and safety. which is what Cal-OSHA, my home state's program, is doing. For example, in response to a union petition, Cal-OSHA is currently proceeding on the fast track to develop a standard for diacetyl and in conducting aggressive inspections of facilities that use this chemical in its operations. In addition, in contrast to federal OSHA, Cal-OSHA is also working on updating large numbers of its chemical standards. The purpose of this hearing today is to begin to understand why OSHA is not even coming close to fulfilling its original mission and what we can do to correct it.